Welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors meeting for the morning of February 18th, 2019. Excuse me. The first item of business is to review the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion approved.
Scott has moved. Santos has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we are here to receive any comments from the public. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on an item that is not currently on our agenda? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Alrighty. Seeing none, we'll move right on to discussion and possible action to approve a Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau non-step highway safety grant application in the amount of $40,515 with Captain Jeff Mullen. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. This is a grant that we request every year. We're requesting 750 hours of overtime for traffic enforcement throughout the year. The grant will start October 1st of 2019 and will run to September 30th of 2020. We're also requesting 4 PBTs and 3 radar units from the state.
Any?
This is the one that's done every year.
Yep. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? All right. Scott has moved. Doug has seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up is item 5, items with County Engineer Keith White. Keith, I understand first we have discussion and possible action to authorize adding equipment maintenance worker position.
Right. You can view that as a mechanic if you wish. We do have a mechanic position in the contract with the union also. This is like the entry-level position for somebody to do. And we've been going outside with that for quite some time now. It costs us a little over $3,000 a week to go outside. This was a budget time. I proposed to add this position, reducing the outside work budget. But if we looked here and were able to hire somebody, I think we can realize an immediate savings of at least half that.
So, this maintenance check was somebody that we would contract out to do what work? You mentioned that you had the maintenance guy do outside contract work.
No, we're using an outside contractor.
Okay, so we're using, so what kind of work would they do?
Mechanic work.
Okay. Which company do you know would we contract that out with?
Not looking to contract it out, I'm looking to hire an employee.
Yeah, that's what you said. You said we would contract it out with somebody else. Was that what
Yeah, it's been with Curry,
okay.
at a negotiated rate of $76.50, and their regular rate's $98 an hour, but we've been paying $76.50.
So it's more like a diesel mechanic kind of work.
All around equipment maintenance, yes.
Keith, you currently have one mechanic on staff, 2?
We have the fleet manager who happens to be a mechanic,
Right.
Which you won't normally find that. And then we have one person working, that actually is working in that area right now.
We discussed this during the budget. I'm good with it. Move to approve.
Santos has moved. Is there a second? Doug is seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the hire of an additional position, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right, motion passes. What else do you have for us, Keith?
On projects, again, not a lot of change. We tentatively have a meeting scheduled Wednesday afternoon with Lutheran Homes to discuss the G28 project. So they had requested the supervisor from their district, which is Doug, be present. We haven't heard back from them yet to know if that's on, but they wanted to meet right away, as we discussed the other day about the staging on this project.
Do you have a time and location for that meeting? I I know it's 10 to.
Proposed is 1:30 at their place. And we have a telephone conference with the Corps of Engineers as the lead agency on our historic bridge up on 120th Street, scheduled also for that afternoon at like 3:30. Involves a lot of parties. I don't know how to simplify this, but normally if you have a potentially historic structure, I'm going to use the words, you have to do something. And so what's normally asked is that you photo document it and you hire a specialist and they write up a description, and so somebody can come look at a picture book with a story, and a write-up similar to what would put it on the designated National Register. Unfortunately, this bridge is already on the National Register. The DOT did a project, quite a number, I think before my time, I believe, so over 20 years ago, statewide, and spent a few $1 million for a report and put a bunch of bridges on the National Register. This is on there, so now the Corps is going, well, you can't do that, so you're gonna have to do, sir, you're gonna have to do something else to spend some money. I don't know how to simplify it anything more than that, before we'll approve you replacing this bridge. So that's what the conference call is about. Now they have proposed that we take the dollars that that report would cost and put it towards some other study in the county. But just be aware those are road dollars, not federal dollars, not state dollars, those are our dollars. So it's really, I think this call will be about negotiating that number. And for whatever reason, they'll want it to go higher, and we'll want it to go lower.
Tell me, Keith, why, we're talking about the bridge west of West Liberty, am I correct?
Yes.
How is it that the Corps is involved in
My simplest, the DOT has gotten more and more out of our business, or their historic people would have been the lead on this. So now it's out to somebody else. So the Corps archaeologist just happens, out of Rock Island, happens to be the lead, and they'll be involved, and SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, will be involved, and a myriad of people will be on this call.
So how old is this bridge?
70 years. You know, it's not unique,
Yeah.
or you wouldn't be,
That's
or you
what I'm
wouldn't
trying
be
to figure
replacing
out,
it.
because I don't quite get it.
We have 2 historic bridges in this county. You know, this is a concrete arch. It's not something that can be relocated. It either gets replaced or it stays there till it falls down. That's,
Sure.
and then you're right. So hopefully this is kind of the last hurdle in the last real hurdle in building that project.
Okay. I was actually expecting that to have more age than that, because,
No.
you know, you look at a few years ago when that south wind wall broke away at that box on Marks Lane there.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if I recall correctly, that structure was 100 years old.
Yeah, well,
So, okay, very good. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I speak to this?
Sure. Please, Lee.
It's Lynn Pruitt with the Historic Preservation Commission, and we are aware of this project. We've got the same call that Keith did, I guess, a notice of this conference call. I think it's Thursday rather than Wednesday, though, but you can check that out. The idea that the Corps of Engineers was putting forward is that it's a mitigation. They're gonna, a historic structure is going to be demolished, and so they want to mitigate that in some way. Usual mitigation, as Keith said, is to document it as it were to be put on the historic register. So since it already is, they feel like they should do something. And the idea is that that something would then come back to the Historic Preservation Commission to utilize that money. So it's kind of going out of one pocket and into the next, both county agencies. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. And I'll plan to be on the call.
And I can't quite see the calendar behind that. Lynn could be right, it might be Thursday the 21st.
Keith, can you give us an update on that next week?
Sure.
Where we're landing on
But yes, they call it mitigation. I would term it something else. So, an expense, that's what I would term it. So, other than that, I think that's everything on the project.
Anything under other?
Update on winter maintenance. We are, we've had several record-setting months, and with the forecast this month, very well maybe record-setting also. Still got a good shot at it. We have exhausted our salt supply, as have countless people. I have been able to get a little more in through countless calls. I did have a call from Power and Water. They were out, and I told them I'd let them know if we found some, which we did. But they had found some too. They're getting theirs all the way from Chicago. So it's just what it is. When I call our regular supplier, it's like, well, you're not alone. Everybody, everybody that's in this area is hurting. So they're reluctant to let loose with any more supply. But, and I know, I think the city has changed their operations a little bit to extend their supply too. So the only thing that's relevant to that is that we're back in the fall when we have two sides in our mix dome. We made a mix that was one salt, one brown sand, and one black sand, being slag sand, which we have not used because of the discussion that came up later. But that's about 300 tons of mix that would have been really nice during ice storms.
So we don't have any salt now, or almost none, right?
Right.
What do we do if there's another, as it looks like there will be another snowstorm?
We have, reduced our salt to sand ratio, and even used some pure sand, pure brown river sand out there. That's mainly what we'll do, and nurse along the supply. I did get an email confirmation this morning from Compass that they had placed an order, so we should have some more salt come in soon. But I mean, they were adamant that they're going to give you a dab, and that's it. About 4 loads.
Is how many is 4 loads?
100 ton.
Can we still mix that 2-to-1 ratio or something?
Well, with heading to warmer temperatures, we'll mix 3-to-1 for sure. Maybe even weaker than that.
Okay.
A lot of it just becomes you know, letting Mother Nature help us out. I mean, we've already been on the weaker stuff, and I think the results out there have been at least acceptable, if not good, out of the effort that people put forth, or guys have put forth. And I want to note, this city is not quite in the same boat, because if they used a bunch of sand, it goes down the storm sewers and creates havoc. So that's why they tend to be more of a pure salt consumer.
So are we seeing any safety issues yet? In your opinion, I mean.
I don't think yet at this point.
Okay.
I mean, if we would run into a bunch of ice storms later in the spring, that's when we're gonna have a problem. And folks don't realize, but ice storms take as much or more material. Because it bonds down, you know, if you have just snow, you push it off. You know, I don't salt my driveway, I push it off and the sun hits it and it's clear.
He said, how many tons to make a normal round for the whole county?
You know, a good 100 tons, maybe a little more.
Okay. All right.
We have a, you know, as we move forward closer to spring, and our temperatures are getting a little warmer, your spread of ice is much greater,
Yes.
much greater. So the real spread is yet to come, in my opinion, as far as ice and that is concerned.
Yes.
The last go around was bad enough. The
In the,
bigger spread is yet to come.
in the storage that you said we had, you have two containers, one of them with the potential for
They're-
black sand.
Yeah, they're side-by-side bunkers. We just been running out of one, the left one with the river sand.
With the river sand.
But for now, you think you can manage without using the black sand mix?
Yes.
Well, if you'd let us know if you ever think that you won't be able to. I mean, obviously, a safety concern is first and foremost in our mind.
Will do.
Anything else?
And to say, other than that, you know, they ran again a good portion of the day yesterday, and you know, a lot of hours on men and equipment. And, you know, doing a pretty good job, I think.
We certainly appreciate their work.
Yeah, they've done a nice job. This is incredibly hard, the amount of hours on this equipment.
It is hard on equipment, and you know, we had like, we've typically been down 1 or 2 trucks. We had one truck rear-ended, and it's out of service, you know. And then you run into things like one of the blade men today has a funeral, so you know, a must-be situation, so they aren't necessarily, you know, we do get these, it's been 30 minutes since it stopped snowing, and why is it, we're not talking about the paved roads, we're talking about the rural roads. And, you know, folks need to understand, you know, what our snow policy is, and they further need to understand, you know, I think it's the changing demographic of less farmers and more, as Washington County calls them, lost urbanites out there. But farmers used to know they might be 2 days, 3 days a week before they could get out, and then they put people on a tractor and took them out. It's really up to this year, I'm gonna say it's been less of an issue because people have 4-wheel drives, which you didn't have so much 30 years ago, but almost everybody has one. We have people, you know, a little car and I can't get out. We had one I think this yesterday or this morning, you know, van stuck at Bancroft and 120th. Well, van stuck on the level B road, one that we wanted to vacate. We don't go down there. So, you know, right past the signs, level B, minimum maintenance, enter at your own risk, literally what they say. So, can't fix those sorts of things.
So I guess I would just say to the people out there, you know, please bear with us as we have a very strange winter, and we're trying to
Yeah.
do everything we can to keep the roads clear. We've got obviously equipment and personnel shortages that kick in at different times. We've got the limitation on the materials we can use because of unforeseen circumstances, but you know, honestly, if there's a safety issue, you know, we'd ask you to keep us apprised. If anybody else out there sees a safety issue, let us know.
On the county website, in the book of ordinances, our snow policies on there. People might want to read that too.
Good. All right. Thanks, Keith. Keep up the good work. Okay. Next up, we have presentation of the final facility master plan study with Mike Nolan from Horizon Architecture. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to walk through this with me this morning. So really, this should be nothing more than a kind of summary and compilation of discussions that we had based off of the executive summary and the strategic planning meeting last November, December. And then Sherry has taken, at least for the first year, the recommendations for budgeting is pretty much what we should have worked into for the time being. So I'm going to read through this every single word, and everybody will follow along. The goal here would be more or less just to present what we have an opportunity for everybody to review it. What I would suggest is we have a couple of days to review, and if there are any comments or questions on this, we can make revisions, and then we will get a final bound version, a copy here for the county. The overall goals of this plan when we embarked on it were twofold. One was to kind of piggyback on what's already been a fairly successful long-term plan for county facilities. So there have been things in the past couple of years. I think the old the building that was divested and was demolished, kind of consolidation of county functions into new facilities. Things are moving along on the right track. And discussions with Oscar and Sherry, essentially we kind of got to the end of that plan. So this was a chance to jump off and say, okay, what do the next 5 to 10 years look like, more from forecasting. The other thing I wanted to do with this tool was to kind of get the arms around in one spot. So for you as a supervisor to have an understanding of all the facilities that you have some way, more jurisdiction over. I know things are done, engineering has facilities that they manage, conservation boards have facilities they manage, but ultimately these are all the property of the county and the supervisor. So while you may not have as much of the direct interaction that we have for the general services stuff, I still wanted to have one kind of spot to be able to flip through and say, okay, this is everything the county has from a built environment. So with the structure of the report, again, I want to thank everybody who spent time to go through this with me. So the staff in engineering and law enforcement, general services were fantastic. Had great access. We had a chance to go through everything in depth, so we had some really good input. That's kind of where a lot of the recommendations. I'm not in the facilities every day, so it really was the end users that we relied upon to tell us what are their pain points, what can we do to make things better, what's working well at this point. So we're going through essentially we have it broken out by administration buildings, law enforcement buildings, the engineering buildings, conservation buildings. Then we'll go through some budget projections, and then you'll see there's 2 appendixes here as we did commission specific engineering, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing surveys for the community services building, and then also for the county jail to address some specific issues, and I'll talk through those findings as we go. I'm going to jump right into, we'll stop here for a second just to give you a sense of what the scope is. So what you can see on the bottom left is what I'll call the downtown campus. So the majority of what I'll call the general services and law enforcement buildings are located down here, essentially right around here. So we have the courthouse, we have the lot just to the north that contains the historic jail. Just to the south here where we are is the administration building. The county jail is right next door. A couple blocks up is the community services building. The other major hub is going to be what we'll call the Park Avenue facility, which has the primary engineering and public works, and then the deputies' quarters. Beyond that, you'll see on the larger map there is kind of the satellite facilities around the county. Those are going to be mainly either conservation with the Salisbury Bridge Recreation Area, the Deep Lakes Park, and then there are satellite facilities, I think 5 scattered around the county, maintenance sheds, if you will, for storage of materials for public works. There are also, if you look on this map, as you dig in a little bit deeper, this is kind of a highlight of every property that was tagged as a Muscatine County. So you'll see there's a lot of smaller parcels. A lot of those have been acquired as conservation easements. So with the flooding and things like that, particularly along the river, those are just more, they probably fall under the conservation board, but those are lots and parcels that are owned by the county. So for the administration buildings, what I'm talking about here is we're going to talk about, and I did lump the courthouse into the administration just because of the functions that go into that. The 3 or 4 buildings we'll talk about are going to be the building we're in right now, county administration office, the county attorney's office. We'll talk about the courthouse, community services under this heading here. And then we'll talk slightly or briefly about the general services and the maintenance, current maintenance area and ways to improve that. So big picture, the structure of this is took each building, kind of broke it down into, we wanted to do an accessibility study for code compliance. We also wanted to do an adherence with existing codes. And the reason we did this was, right now the buildings are more or less grandfathered in the conditions they are. So unless you do something to a building, there's different levels that will trigger different requirements. So this is more from a future-proofing standpoint of if I want to embark on a project in this building, what would I have to do to bring it up to code? So that's a little of the synopsis you'll see there in the building data, more or less. And then we have a use of occupancy. This is something that if you embarked on an individual project in each building would become more of an in-depth, but this is a starting point to understand what the budgetary impacts of any sort of future work on a building would be. For this building that we're in right now, this building's in great shape. So this is a masonry building. It was well maintained when it was owned by H&I. It was handed over. There was a renovation done in this building, which got us to the state we are right now. The big project that's currently underway is the administration, the elevator replacement, and I'll talk briefly about that schedule when we finish up with this. Once that is completed, then I would say by and large this building is in very good shape. The big recommendations are this: keep the periodic maintenance going, so keep the exterior in good shape. It's painted brick, so keep that paint going, keep that well maintained, and then the membrane roof is in good shape right now and is working well. So again, these are just things to kind of watch and see over time. The expected cycle on that for replacement of roofs is about 20 to 25 years. And we'll talk through as we go through this. The condition right now in this building, I think this roof is, Oscar, correct me, we're about 10 years into this roof. So, and then into the next 15 years, this may need replacement. Again, those are things you monitor. If it's in good shape, then it can go a little bit longer, but if it starts to show deterioration, roofs are particularly things that you want to get on quickly and keep the roofs all in good shape as we go through. But again, this building is in very good shape. It is a business primary occupancy. It's a sprinklered throughout, so this building has a lot of flexibility to it as well. So I don't see any real anticipated future use of this building. We're pretty much at full occupancy right now. If there were any interior renovations or reshuffling, that would essentially keep us in the same occupancy. So no major cost implications beyond the scope of the project, if that makes sense. The next building is the county attorney's office, which is attached to this building. There is one door that attaches the two buildings. It's right now I think it's boarded up in the assessor's area back there. That is not communicating anymore, so that's essentially walled off on this side. The county attorney's office, again, it's a single story for the most part. It has a partial basement. The big issues with the county attorney's office, there's nothing as far as sprinkling or fire protection because it is such a small building, but it has an accessible path to get into the building, but there's no accessible restroom facility, so there's no accessible toilet in that building. To go to the toilet, you have to go down the stairs to a small, fairly compact toilet that wouldn't meet any sort of current ADA or accessibility standards. What you'll see is if we wanted to do any renovation work on that building, that would probably trigger the need to get that brought up to the accessible toilet standard for sure. We've already talked with Alan about doing a overall space planning survey, see what that looks like. We're also looking at doing the entry security upgrades. These are nice to have sort of deals. Nothing that's going to trigger any specific requirements. But this building, the big shortcoming I see is just that lack of accessible toilet. Right now, not an issue, but if you did have a staff member who wanted to work there, you wouldn't necessarily have accommodation for them. If you do want to get the nearest accessible toilet, you have to leave the building, come into the administration building, and then use the main level toilets here, which is possible, just not an ideal configuration, I would say.
Mike, the internal door between these two buildings, could that be modified more easily to allow access to the accessible restroom in this building?
I'm getting a head shake here. I would say potentially, theoretically, yes, you could make a corridor off of that, but I'm guessing the way that be on the other side of the door on this side is set up right now. That's an office space, I believe. So we have
Treasurer's office.
Treasurer's office. We would have to reconfigure that space to create a pathway there. Again, that certainly is an option that could be explored as well.
I mean, there, if you go back over there by that's where we're talking, the two accessible restrooms are right by that exit door, and the county attorney's office has a door there. What about just kind of enclosing that area and making it a full walkway? I mean,
That could be another option too. You have to do more of a vestibule between the two offices.
exactly, you know.
And that could be something we would talk about, and I think we could probably fairly, again, it's gonna be a cost trade-off.
Exactly, I'm just
With
wondering if that
cost
would,
and
I mean,
space.
if that'd be a less costly means of accomplishing the same, and
Something definitely we should explore and look at. If we were to create more of an enclosed vestibule, we just wanna make sure, one of the things we're trying to do is increase the security level for the county attorney staff, so there's less access. So again, that's probably something that could be, handled through, hardware on a door, if we put a door at that point to get through. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a good option as well. Other things on this building, there's been over time some separation of the terrazzo panels. You can see as you walk, particularly along the sidewalk here, where the gaps kind of opened up and it's been caulked and filled in. If you look at that, I don't see any real danger of imminent failure, but there obviously is something that's happening there we want to address. And I have that, you'll see that's probably on the 1 to 5 year recommendation. The other thing is that this has an existing, an EPDM, that's basically a membrane roof that's kind of at the end of its service life. So that's something else that I would anticipate coming up. You'll see that as a roof replacement for this building coming up in the next couple of years. Community services building, so it's the old post office. This is again, a masonry building, 2 stories, but they're both accessible based on the slope. So you have an entrance on the basement level and then an entrance on the main level. This building's in very good shape. We just did the windows in this building last year. I haven't been up to see the exact roof condition, but I think that the asphalt shingles were done recently. Again, about a 25-year cycle on these, so I'd anticipate this will be a routine maintenance for that building. The big things, again, from a use standpoint, all a business-based occupancy. The size of the building and the egress would not require us to go to any sort of sprinkling. Probably even if we went to like an assembly occupancy, depending on how much was there. And when I say assembly business, assembly is you get a lot of people in a little space. Business is more like office space, and more spread out, lower threat of loss of life. So this building has a lot of flexibility. It is actually about 100% occupied right now. The basement has a little more flexibility, but there are bigger conference rooms right down there that do get regularly used at this point. The big things that you'll see on this building is we commissioned a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing survey just based off of the life. Most of the buildings in the downtown section are on campus geothermal, so are relatively new. This is not on that system, so what we found is essentially the boiler system in that building is about the end of the service life. So you'll see a recommendation over here for the next 3 to 5 years to replace equipment, so that can be by attrition or it could be a wholesale. We'll talk a little through the costs on that. Otherwise, one of the recommendations from the mechanical study for both of these buildings was to do an arc flash study. And as I understand that, it's a study they go through and look at all the circuiting through the entire building and figure out where the points are potential danger for somebody who's working on the electric, come up with I think there's some protective measures that would go into place, but then more or less getting the proper labeling on the cabinets just so people are aware of the proper risk as they go through. So that's something that's and I'll have to look through the exact language, but it's becoming more required more from an OSHA standpoint. So that's something that we'll recommend to maybe start to look at here in the next couple of years. Otherwise, community services building is in good shape.
how many people does that building house currently, do you know? I'm trying to see it, but I'm not so good at the small print.
Total, let's see, so the total, this is, again, these are based on maximum occupancies here, so the maximum will be 172 people based off of the square footage, and that comes down to an allowance of 100 square foot per person in
Does
the
that mean
building.
people jammed into the building, or people working in the building?
That would be people jammed into the building. I don't know what the exact staff levels are right now, but I know it's not that high. I would say probably somewhere closer to 60 at the most.
I think there are 44 DHS staff.
And 10 or 11 community service, so.
And the DH, they're not county folks, right?
They're state.
Do they Will the state compensate us any way for having office space there?
We get reimbursed a minimum
How minimal?
amount.
I mean, is it like a symbol, or is it something that is actually worthwhile?
Well, we get reimbursed, depending on the cost advisory report, it runs usually about 30%. But we also get reimbursed for any remodeling, so when we remodel that space to move them in, they're reimbursing us back for their share of that, and then
And that's amortized over a period of time, right? Yeah.
depending on what it is, some of it we got right away, some of it's 5 years, some of it's 10 years. But the day-to-day operations, because a number of years ago, DHS staff were county employees. When the state said we're gonna take staff, that's all they took, were the staff. We buy their computers, their paper, their pencils, we pay the utilities, we're required by code to do that. So anything that is paid in that building, like the utility bill, it's split based on square footage, it's a 49-51% split, and then we get reimbursed roughly 30% of that.
So, are we required by code to pay for the things that we have to pay for because we house them, or because it's just the law that we have to pay for that?
We have to pay for that, but before we moved into one of our buildings, we paid their rent in the other building, their rent janitorial.
That's required by law?
Yes,
That's a big old crock.
it is, but that's, that's by code. So that was part of the reason we decided it's a better deal for us to put in one of our buildings since we have space.
Let's see. Another hidden unfunded mandate.
Absolutely.
Yay!
Now, I will say, the manager we have now, Felicia Topper, that budget hasn't increased in a number of years, and they come in under budget. She's pretty frugal, understands they're spending county taxpayer dollars, so
Don't imagine,
Much
several
different
counties
than-
are not so lucky to have someone so good.
much different than it used to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on, the next building is the courthouse. Historic register building, and you can see the primary use of the building right now is we'll call administration, so a business occupancy on the first and second floor, and a good portion of the third floor. On the third floor, we do have the 2 courtrooms, one of which is currently under renovation. The building does have a full basement and a full attic above. Again, this building is in very good condition, it's been well maintained over time, it's in very good condition compared to a lot of county courthouses I've seen. Periodic maintenance I would anticipate, and actually one more just got tagged on there from a walkthrough this morning. The roof is in good shape, was recently repaired or replaced, the windows are in good shape. The thing we'll want to watch over time is just to watch the condition of the masonry joints in the building. It will at some point most likely require tuck pointing, but that could probably be a 25 to 50 year time frame on that at the earliest. So as long as that's maintained in good condition, it should be fine. The thing you want to watch is once that starts to deteriorate, it's not something to let go, because that's really the only waterproofing for the building, if you will. All the drainage is on the exterior. Seeing some courthouses that have let that go, it really leads to some much bigger issues, and it happens in a hurry. So again, that's a kind of a watch and see, but on an annual basis, inspecting, making sure that stays in good shape. As part of they're doing tear out right now, and I was just walking through with the foreman. He found a spot where he thinks there may still be some leaking around the gutters, which he said has been a persistent problem in the courthouse. That's the first we've heard of it this morning. We're gonna take a look. He has a chance to get a lift up there. We're gonna try and take a look as part of the courthouse renovation or courtroom renovation project and see if we can look at what that detail is and if there's a better long-term solution. Sounds like right now it's just a regular application of sealant. So what we'll do as part of the courtroom renovation project, take a look at that and come up with a recommendation. Otherwise, and again, he's not sure if it's active leaking or if it's just kind of residual from the past. Something definitely we want to get verified before we go any farther into getting plaster repair done in that space. A particular note, the courthouse does not currently have a central fire alarm or security system, so you'll see there's a recommendation. Again, not a requirement, but probably a very good idea to have. The courthouse, we were gonna get away, or say that we can be grandfathered into certain conditions because it is a historic building and you get a little more leeway in the existing building code based on those historic conditions. With the current renovation that we're doing, we did bump up to an alterations level 2, I believe, or actually we're alterations level 1 due to we didn't go over 50% of any floor area. Now, of note is that with the assembly occupancy we do have in the courtroom, if you go to an alterations level 2, that would potentially trigger the requirement to sprinkler the entire structure. We don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to, and if this project or any future project is think about the scope and scale of the projects, again, probably to break things up to make sure that you're not going to hit that trigger. I think that sprinklering in this building is probably not a really requirement just due to the totally non-combustible nature of most of the finishes and the construction of the courthouse. So that's where we get a little bit of that leeway. But I think it would just be a very big invasion into the space and probably unnecessary cost. So at this point, we're in good shape. The city is on board with our current interpretation, so we are proceeding with that. The addition of a fire alarm system, a central fire alarm, I think that would probably not be a bad thing to think about in the next couple of years. Otherwise, we're seeing that with this courtroom renovation, there's a recommendation that was put out by, I think it was not the bar, but the Judges Association, looking at courthouse security best practices and recommendation. And there are a couple of courthouses I'm working with right now that are looking at putting on security vestibules, going essentially to single securable entrance with only one way into the courthouse that has then an option to put up a metal detector, baggage scanners, things along that line. We talked briefly through that. That's something that may come down the line. There's nothing mandated yet, but there again, unfunded mandates may come up at some point. My guess is that's probably about a $300 square foot. The one we're looking at in Hardin County was about $125,000 to $150,000 to get that space put onto the building. So again, I have no particular reason to think that that's something that's coming down the line, but again, those guidelines do exist down there. You never know what could come through legislation, so that would be something that we potentially want to think about. That would be an addition which wouldn't trigger any requirements inside the building, but on the exterior of the building would certainly have some impacts and ramifications there. The last building we'll talk about under administration is the historic jail and the maintenance building. So this is the historic sheriff's jail on the other side of the courthouse. Two-story full basement. Of note, this is the building that houses the county's central geothermal equipment. We completed a mothball project on the front portion of this building last year, basically to get the basement and all these the dirt floors out of there, get everything paved. The idea is to stabilize that for the long term and potentially for a future use of that space based off of a historic preservation study put together by Doug Steinmetz. So currently the front of the space, we are using that as short term for a little bit of flex storage while we're doing the courtroom renovation, but otherwise that space was cleaned up. We installed structural stabilization in the attic. So this building is in very good shape. The roof is fairly new. Windows are new, recently replaced, and the building was tuck pointed. So it's in very good shape. The biggest thing we see here, as we talked about, is just a mismatch between the use of that building and really the size and the function of it. So right now the maintenance garages are in the back, so there's some small space for Oscar and his staff, kind of office space. There's a small storage area which has seasonal yard equipment. It's not really big enough to handle everything, so the general services maintenance is split between this facility and then the Washington Street, which we'll talk about here shortly. Long-term impacts with the yard equipment being stored in there, particularly the snow removals, you'll see in the basement, we're starting to see some deterioration and degradation of the steel structure in the basement of the building. That I see is probably the biggest threat to this building. Again, just a mismatch of the kind of construction type and use of the building. The location is good, but there's not really enough space for that to function. Additionally, there's not an accessible route, so if you had a potentially mobility impaired employee, they wouldn't be able to get into that office space, and there's not an accessible restroom. So good flex space currently, but something that we need to address. So you'll see one of the recommendations for this building is essentially we're talking about a central maintenance and search and rescue facility separate to get maintenance relocated out of this building, at which point we mothball this building entirely until such time that I think the discussion is that the Historic Society would raise funds to take this, or basically to turn this building into a museum space. But either way, in the meantime, it's not really working well as a maintenance facility, is to get the maintenance out there, get that building cleared out, keep it stabilized, if for no other reason than the geothermal equipment's in that building, so we want to keep that in good shape for a long time. So in this image, you can see essentially we have slightly skewed. The maintenance building, or the jail, as you can see it with the green space, the county jail is to the bottom left, and then the kind of the gray in space there is, that image got really skewed. Essentially, you're looking at about the size and scale we're looking at for a new combination maintenance and search and rescue garage. That was originally, this parcel we had that set up is on the green space. It's on the, we'll call it the north side of that quadrant. As we're talking through this, I think that the scope of this project, we want to think a little more through exactly how that comes together. This being more or less a very important parcel for the county and for the city. Thinking about how that goes on, that we don't want to just going to pop a whole building up on site. We want to think about a way to use that as a community asset, if you will. To start to make that connection between the work that H&I is doing on its area to try and tie in around its neighborhoods, and then the downtown section. So I look at this as a pretty important site. So in the months to come, as we start to talk about this project, we really want to make sure we study that carefully and come up with a good solution that's going to benefit the county and the city. Elsewise in this page, you can see there's just some images of the buildings. The Washington Street storage, this is kind of a catch-all because this space is, I wasn't sure exactly where to put this, but this is a spot that seemed to land in a report. Part of this is it's three functions. You have a parcel that has two buildings and a lot of outside storage, two more or less clear span metal structures with a small addition on one of them. This is currently occupied by the county general services maintenance. The sheriff's office has two bays of the building you can see on the top right, and then the other two bays are used by the volunteer search and rescue. This whole area is in the floodplain, and all the buildings in this area are in, I would say, fair to poor condition, and not really doing what the jobs they need to do. The bays for the search and rescue and the sheriffs are not insulated, or I would say partially insulated, which more or less equates to not insulated. They're not heated. They have seasonal water, I think, in the sheriff's side only. So again, it's storage space at the very best, at the very base definition of it. The other building has a general services maintenance. There's some seasonal equipment storage. There's a small storage space. The addition that you can see in kind of the bottom right, that little white building, is in very bad shape. I think we went into the basement, there's actually standing water in that. So again, it's not a very functional facility. That combined with the distance from the downtown doesn't make it a very functional use for the general services. By and large, the recommendation with this is let's divest the functions that are here, move them elsewhere. So search and rescue and general services would come to the downtown campus. Law enforcement will go to the Park Avenue area, and then this could either be mothballed, potentially raised, or just divested from the county. So I don't see any very good use of this in the long term, particularly given its location in the floodplain. So the recommendation is let's get the uses out of there, get people housed where they need to be for long-term maintenance, cost, and net efficiency, and just get rid of it. So any questions on the admin portion? Pastor Fun here?
Yeah, I just had one question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned on the courthouse that you were gonna add another list to the gutters that you were looking at. And you had the lifts set up for them to look at them today, I think you mentioned. Do you ever use drones for your inspections?
I have not yet. So that's something that certainly as the technology is coming along, it may be viable. I have a friend who's an arborist that he wrecked his drone, but it's an interesting idea. So that actually would be a very good
I
application
mean, just
for it.
thinking about the weather and the conditions that we're gonna go out there and just you're gonna do an inspection for somebody and utilize that heavy equipment in this weather. You know, there's no value for that from your perspective for our views and before and after picture, things like that.
Absolutely. So if you're suggesting I get a new toy for my survey, I'll definitely take that under advisement.
Well, I think the cost probably versus renting the equipment and the labor for somebody versus utilizing your ability to just look at it, take pictures,
You bet.
value at it.
At this point, I'm going to rely on the general contractor. They have a lift on site. If we can get ourselves up there with that, then that's the way we'll go. If we need to go any further to, in particular, rent specialized equipment, that's something I would come back and get your approval on before we did that. Well, that's a good suggestion. Okay. Next is the sheriff's deputies' quarters to move into law enforcement. This building is located on Park Avenue, and you see in the bottom right, essentially it's all business occupancy, single story, no basement. The building itself condition is in okay condition. It's vinyl sided, steel roof. Big picture, the kind of maintenance items, the vestibule has been kind of a long-term issue, so not very good weather sealing, not good conditioning, so that's been kind of a constant, I think, a source of aggravation. So something that we need to, one way or another, address directly. Function-wise, the building has kind of grown over time, so the things I saw in the walkthrough is that currently evidence storage is a pretty big concern, and then also kind of firearm storage is another concern. The big issue with evidence storage is that there's no dedicated sealed off area for storage of narcotics or other type of noxious substance potentially. So there's, talking with the deputies we walk through, is there's times where you have large storage of things such as marijuana that just, it permeates through the building. So that's definitely almost a health hazard issue. The other issue was in the current firearm storage area, there's not a climate control, so weapons that are seized or temporarily impounded, owners are getting them back with oxidation, things along that line. So again, thinking about that. Otherwise, the building is regionally set up for what it's used for. There's a couple of full-time kind of offices in there, and then more or less it becomes landing space for the deputies who are mainly out in patrol. So it's to have a space to come back in. Everybody has a desk to drop their stuff out for the time they're there, but by and large they're out on patrol anyway. So there may be one or two deputies at any time that are actually in that facility doing reports, things along that line. There's kind of a laundry list of things that could be better about this facility. The heating and air conditioning is not even. My guess is that's probably because the insulation's not very even, so that'd be something to look at and consider. The evidence storage is something that absolutely needs to be addressed, and the other thing that would be very nice to have is that, particularly during inclement weather, right now the deputies come in, if they're on patrol, they just need to have to leave their cars running so they keep from icing over or getting the snow accumulation, or they have to go out and clear the snow from their vehicle before they can do an emergency response. The idea here was to add some sort of an enclosed garage or parking area so active patrol vehicles have a place to park there in the meantime. So you can see in the top right, that's a rough idea. We'll have to coordinate with Keith and engineering to figure out exactly where the best location for an addition is, but understanding that having just recently repaved the parking lot, maybe we look at something along that line. But the recommendation for this facility is to do an addition that was going to encompass the evidence storage, so have a separately ventilated evidence area, and then also have a garage parking function in the space. And along with that, probably address some of the issues on the building, look at the insulation of the existing building, and potentially look at balancing the HVAC system if that's possible. The county jail. And I apologize, I do not know why my underlays got so skewed on every single one of these, so that's why we have one go back here. The jail is generally in really good condition. It kind of does what it does. It's a jail. It's a building that was built in two phases. So there was a primary jail that was built, I think, in the mid-90s with a larger wing addition that was added on later. You see the little blue strip up front is the jail administration offices, kind of the public entrance. Everything else kind of falls in the jail. I didn't add that much specific detailed information about the overall layout for more or less to preserve security concerns with the jail here. But by and large, it seems like everything works pretty well. One thing we did do is we commissioned a particular mechanical, electrical, and plumbing study because of issues that they had with what's called the multi-stack, which is a unit that takes geothermal conditioned air, uses that, but then also takes air from different places in the jail, trying to take, if I have a place that wants hot and there's hot air over here and cool over here, essentially to balance those versus having to condition every bit of air that comes through. There have been issues with the compressors in that system in the past, so we had their consultants come through and look at that. And I'll talk a little bit through that as we get into the MEP issues. But by and large, the facility's in good shape. The things I see is the new addition has a new TPO, so the white roof membrane on there that's in fairly good condition, with the exception are there some areas that become delaminated. It's supposed to be completely glued down, and there's parts that have come unadhered. The issue with that is that if you do get a windstorm, and it could have happened during a windstorm, as that starts to blow and flap, you'll get negative pressure, which will continue to pull that up, and you could have, over time, a catastrophic failure of the roof if it's not corrected. So we've discussed looking at that under warranty, as a warranty repair, to get that portion of the new addition re-adhered or get that taken care of. If it's not a warranty item, it's something that needs to be addressed here within the next year or so, for sure. The original portion has the existing roofing, the EPDM roof, which is nearing the end of the service life. So you're going to see that as a recommendation to replace that entire roof sometime in the next probably 5 years. The other thing we looked at from a function standpoint is so the jail is a 200 and, where's my number here, 56 bed facility. The intake facility, or the Sally Port, was essentially sized with the original portion of the jail. So what this jail is, it has our native Muscatine County inmates, but then we also did overflow from other counties, so we are housing folks from outside. So a little bit of the operational challenge we discussed last time is you can have a lot of people show up for in-processing in a very short amount of time, and the current Sally Port or intake facility is not sized for that. One thing that would help increase the efficiency and probably be a nice security upgrade would be to increase the overall size of the Sally Port and to think about how that area goes together. So you'll see that's the little block that's totally skewed off of its background right now. But that's roughly on the, if you look on the red, I don't have a really way to do a pointer here, do I? If you look to the red, kind of the bump that's on the bottom of the diagram for the jail, that's where the Sally Port is right now. Essentially doing an addition more or less in the same location and expanding that out. The impacts of that would be the parking area. So one other option that recently was suggested is that white long box, if you look to the bottom, is between 2nd Street and the jail. There's basically it's the old, I think, the Tint and Curl building, which is essentially a 0 lot line building that is decrepit and falling down. Could probably be easily acquired by the county, and that could be a space that could be reutilized to add parking for the sheriff, or to move space over if we lose parking with that addition. So again, looking at some long-term potentials and possibilities for that. I will get that graphic updated so it makes more sense, but that's essentially what we're attempting to disclose there. So you'll see that, again, predicted maintenance cost is the TPO. Let's get that fixed and replace the EPDM. One thing that was brought up with particularly the extreme cold snap we had is there's portions of the original wing, I believe, that are not insulated. So there's one area of the jail in particular that they're not able to keep temperature control in. This is probably adding to some stress overall with the overall mechanical system. If you have areas that are heating and cooling differentially, getting things mixed over, getting in the right place. If you have one area that doesn't have insulation and you have areas that are insulated, that's just going to make it harder. The system's going to be working harder to do that. When we had the extreme cold, we're not able to keep temperature there. A recommendation was obviously going inside in this particular type of construction. It's challenging because obviously you have to have it very durable. You have the security concerns. The thought here was let's figure out what those areas that are of particular concern and potentially look at something like an EFIS, which is an exterior insulation and finishing system where they do the insulation on the outside of the building. That would probably be a very good retrofit option there. So that's something I would recommend maybe we look at within the next year before we get to the next winter. The nice thing about that type of work is it can be all done from the exterior with no real reason to get inside the building. We'll talk about some critical mechanical items when we get there, and then long-term MEP recommendations, and then the intake facility addition. Sometime, again, that would be a very nice to have. I think it's something that would definitely benefit, but I'll let the sheriff address that when will be the best time to think about that type of project. Again, a couple of images of the facilities. All right. That's it for the law enforcement. So any questions or comments on the law enforcement?
You mentioned about that retrofit for the EIFS. Have we ever done that before?
I did not find any EFIS in the county buildings. So you'll see it more on commercial buildings. So if you get buildings that have kind of a stucco-like appearance, that's essentially what the finish of it looks like. It's styrofoam or what's an expanded polystyrene installation, so that the rumor is that the guy that invented the stuff was sitting there drinking a cup of coffee out of insulated cups and said, hey, this would be great for buildings. It's a little better than that, but it's more or less if you put a drain plane behind it, it gets adhered to the building, and then you get the finish over top of it. It's a good durable finish over time, particularly in the areas that we're talking about are going to be more or less an enclosed yard. So it's a good system. All right. So the engineering building. So we'll just talk kind of briefly through here. So by and large. Engineering's done a good job of making the best of what they have. So I'm here to plug in a disclaimer is Keith does not ask for any of this, but I think that these are some things that could be done well. So the facility currently out there's two kind of clear span metal buildings which are attached by an addition. There's some outbuildings and sheds, and then there's a new snowplow shed. The snowplow shed is awesome. I mean, it's a very nice facility, very well done. The buildings, by and large, what I see is the biggest challenge is that they've kind of worked over time with P&Z to make their office spaces work in there. It's become a little bit more of like a rabbit warren, so figuring out good space where they need to be. It just is, I feel like if they had a separate building, so take the administration portions out of where the vehicle maintenance and storage and that stuff goes, that would be the long-term kind of hey, this would be a really nice thing to do. The other thing it would do is that the county has done a very nice job presenting itself as a good professional organization with the administration and everything. I think if you pulled that piece out and had a place I walked into that felt like a good professional office building, I really feel like that's probably the last piece that walk in there, it has a nice front on that, but as I kind of get back into it a little more, I mean, Keith and his guys, man, bless them for doing what they're doing and working in the space they have and not squawking about it, but I think that it would be nice for the county to think about upgrading their spaces. So that's probably the big recommendation is the long term is to look at potentially doing essentially a standalone office building more or less out in front of where the current the garages are. What that would do would also kind of free up some space, take the inside of those clear span buildings, get that cleared out, get that maintenance space back, get the storage space back where it needs to be. As we were walking through, everything is pretty well taken care of, but there's always room, and as things kind of go, they're always bursting at the seams for storage. That's pretty much the big recommendation. There is some minor maintenance, and I'm not sure if this got handled this year, a new rooftop unit that's leaking. And then the other thing we looked at is we did a drive-through survey of all of the satellite facilities throughout the county. 4 were in pretty good condition. 1, I think you guys know, needs to be replaced. So the thought was when that needs to be replaced is to design a prototype facility and essentially have a set of plans licensed, so when the other ones come up for replacement, you just dust those plans off so the county has uniform satellite facilities throughout. And you can see from the pictures, 4 of them look very similar. And the exception being the Funk Hills, or Funk's Hill, which is a single door. Just it needs to be replaced sooner than later. The other facilities are in pretty good shape. A little bit of oxidation in places on the exterior vents, and then just wear and tear that come from being around a lot of vehicles. But by and large, these facilities, drive up to them, they look good. They're presenting nicely for the county. The last is really more than anything on the conservation buildings, just to give a quick overview of what's out there. Kurt does a great job of taking care of his facilities. I know you guys are in the loop on that. Conservation board things are very nice, present a lot of really good amenities for the county, but more or less just to let you guys know what you have out there. The big areas are Discovery Park and Salisbury Bridge Recreation Area, and then the third of note is the Deep Lakes Park. Doesn't currently have many facilities, but there's discussion about adding cabins there, so that's another place that will have built structures here in the near future. All right, so what's all this going to cost? I'm not going to go through this in depth. This is essentially, it's more of in each section I talk about what I see the projections for each building. So this is a synopsis building by building of what the recommendations are. But the last slide I want to walk through is this slide, which is a timeline of more or less what I see as big projects and recommendations for and time frames for that. So 2019 to 2020, so this is kind of the 1 to 2 year outlook. We talked about some minor infiltration here in the admin building, attorney's office, entry security modifications, engineering, HVAC, so that's the rooftop unit, and then replace or repair the front door in the sheriff's office. Those are kind of immediate action items, so those are maintenance things to take care of. Bigger picture, we have the county jail and MEP critical items. So that's from the MEP, that's the arc flash study, and then the recommendation was from the engineers to purchase, basically they have bench stock for some of the longer lead item compressors for the Venmar and the multi-stack, which are 2 of those, the mechanical units on the jail, just to have those available. And then at the point, it sounds like the compressors are functioning better than they had after the initial geo got sorted out. But if there was another failure, to do a forensic investigation of that compressor failure to back it up. We had, for the mechanical, we did a full analysis through the entire jail facility, and then we had an expert in geothermal, large-scale geothermal, look at the overall system, and they didn't find anything that they thought was like a glaring issue. So I think some of it is, there's just, in that jail, you're operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Things are going to wear out, but if we look at some of the ancillary pieces that we can balance with the where the heating demands go, and you'll see one of the recommendations also is that the actual equipment room is not air conditioned, so you're going to have some heat stresses in that equipment room. So if you read thoroughly into the MEP recommendations, part of it is get spare equipment, but then let's address the equipment room. And I think that by addressing the facility insulation, that will help take some of the stresses off of that system overall. But big picture, yep, things break. It's just a high, intense use facility. It sounds like by and large, there's nothing glaring out there right now, but having pieces so if it does go down, we can get that fixed. The other thing to look at was controls. It's supposed to be a triple redundant system, and it sounds like in the past when that one's gone down, the whole thing has gone down. So that could be a software issue to look at, is to have the controls set up to where if we do lose one, the other are picking up the load. So it's a mission critical facility. We're not having those long-term downtime. Community services, MEP critical items, again, that was an arc flash study. There's some egress lighting we would look at, and then there were some boilers that are probably right on their last legs, so those are recommended. And then the rest of the community services, essentially swapping out 90% of the mechanical equipment in that building over the next 5 years, just because it's at the end of the service life. Community services, ramp repairs, so something Oscar and I looked at, just some minor spalling, something to keep an eye on, but it's probably a smaller project we can look at, just get some concrete patch. Again, stop water from getting into concrete before it gets too far is always a good rule of thumb. And then the 2 larger projects, maintenance, new facility for maintenance in the search and rescue, and, sorry, maybe we move that. And then for the sheriff's office, doing the addition there to get the covered parking and the evidence storage. So this is kind of a domino. If we do that, so we get the sheriff's office addition taken care of with the deputies' quarters, get the new maintenance building, we can get Washington Street cleared out, and then we can decide what to do with the Washington Street facility. But those are, I think, shorter term items that we should jump onto right away. And that would kind of sort everything out, get the county consolidated to the downtown campus, the Park Avenue campus, and with the conservation board. Just really have that kind of one hanger on of the Washington Street catch-all. I think we can get that out of the way. So by and large, in the next couple of years, and I think you've already talked through budget for this year, but for this year and into next year, I see a total of about $1.75 million for all of those projects. So that's kind of the immediate, let's do this in the next couple of years recommendation. The next block kind of jumps down to we'll call it the 3 to 5 year recommendations. So that would be for the jail is a roof replacement. Big roof, just going to cost money to get done, so probably somewhere in the $750,000 for that project. The county attorneys, so roof replacement and facade repairs, I think that would be something to engage in all at one time. Again, that's a smaller building, but still with a roof somewhere in the range of about $100,000. And that's something you'll see a range on that, probably start assessing it, and then we can really figure out what that is and then put that into the regular bucket at the time. Courthouse, fire detection and alarm, again, a nice to have, not a gotta have, but I think something would definitely be good for the courthouse. And then a prototype satellite facility, more or less, look at replacing that Funks Hill facility and getting that prototype done. I'll leave to Keith for the exact, but I'm guessing that's probably something that wants to happen sooner than later. The next, then, kind of the 5 years and beyond, we have the county services MEP items. So there's critical items, and there's things that kind of stretch out longer. So we have the critical stuff up front, you're seeing as we get into the, year 5 to 7 now, that's what we're talking about, all the MEP items for the community services. The sheriff's office, HVAC, so if that's something that we can't replace or can't address the balance of that system and the comfort with the addition project, then it may be replacing that entire, items. This is for the deputies quarters. Attorney's office accessible upgrades, since we talked about with the restroom and how to get the accessible restroom into the attorney's office, and then expand the intake facility for the county jail. That's something that's a pretty big project. There's gonna be a lot of coordination to go with that, particularly from an operations standpoint, so I kind of put that in. Let's start talking about that, but that's probably, a 3 to 7 year project out. So in that bucket, we're looking at about, again, these are broken up into roughly $1.25 million chunks as we go down the line. And then as we get to the bottom, you're seeing our last kind of 3 items there are the non-critical maintenance or mechanical, electrical, and plumbing items. And then for engineering, I like to do it whenever it makes sense, but it's probably something that can be pushed out a little bit as well. So that's pretty much the big picture of the report. And we talked through, I think, the items on the 2 critical items for the MEP is really community services at the end of service life, just needs to be replaced over the next several years. And then for the jail, there's just a kind of a smattering of things that are kind of recommended of best things we can do to help maintain that system and get that bench stock in place. I'm gonna stop talking now.
Any questions for Mike?
Yeah, Mike, on the geo, is that the only one location that we have geothermal?
No, the county geothermal, yeah, so the downtown campus, so the geothermal, it is housed in the historic jail, and it services the county jail, it services the courthouse, and it serves the administration and attorney's office. So all of those buildings are on that geothermal system.
And you're recommending some new pumps and I think some equipment for that for spares?
Yeah, I think that what's happened over time is, or when those have failed, and the system's down, they're a longer lead item. So I think for a mission critical facility, having those on hand just so it's a quick swap out versus having to place an order and then potentially be a few years without it would be just a good recommendation.
How
For
old
the
is that?
jail specifically.
For the jail specifically,
Yeah, for the jail specifically, equipment for the jail.
Okay. How old is the whole system?
For the geo, Oscar, I think it's less than 10 years, right? 11.
So what kind of a life do you think that one's got?
I think with the proper maintenance, geo, there should be, you're gonna have to replace pieces of it. So the big investment is the wells in the field, but figure a pump is probably gonna have somewhere from a 10 to 25 year lifespan on it. So that's something that will just require regular maintenance. Moving parts are just gonna need replacement. But systems, controls, things like that, as long as they're upgraded and maintained, it should keep running. The challenge would be if you have a legacy system that becomes obsolete for the controls at some point, that could be an issue, but nothing anticipated at this point.
Okay.
Mike, is your thought on that Washington Street facility down there, just to liquidate that piece?
I don't see, I would not recommend that you build anything back in there. I think what's from a functional standpoint, it's become a little bit of a catch-all. So if you drive around, it's doing, because there's space, nature abhors a vacuum. Things get parked down there, it becomes a kind of an overflow spot. I would say the facilities, either divest it or most likely demo it, and go to flat site on it. If you want to do that, obviously we want to do an asbestos survey, a lead survey, something along that line. But if you could commercially sell that and somebody wanted to take that on, I don't see that being an issue. I don't see anything that's dangerous there per se, just not something that you want to take on the investment of bringing it up to a level where it would want to be for you to keep using it long
Yeah,
term.
it really doesn't fit into the puzzle, does it?
No, it's a little bit of an outlier.
When you
And-
said, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And on the engineers, new office space, refresh my memory, where would the location of that be built? To the east of the existing building currently?
It does seem to be the most logical spot, so there's fairly
That's what I
large,
was thinking.
yeah.
And how many square foot?
I think around 4,000 square feet. just looking at the space that was in there right now, that's something we would need to go through and kind of do
Sure.
more of a programming between engineering and planning and zoning to figure out. But that about 4,000 square feet, about the size of what you have right now for the deputies' quarters, seems like that we can facilitate what's in there.
In my mind, I would think we'd want a little more square footage than that, but that's just a preliminary thought.
Yeah, I think there's space for it. So certainly, again, square footage, you can figure from a budget standpoint for that type of building, you're probably looking at somewhere to $150 to $175 a square foot. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of straight to math.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
On the Washington Street, when you were mentioning earlier, did you say raise the level as far as the grade, or you mean just?
So raise, R-A-Z-E, knock it down. So, yeah, clear the site.
Raise it up, or raise it down, not raise it up, right?
We could raise it, and then we get out of the floodplain. You can
I was wondering if
first
you meant
violate.
like bring in,
No.
a couple hundred tons of dirt or something.
That would not be a good recommendation.
Anybody else? Mike, thanks a lot for all your work.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a quick update, so courthouse, they are finally demoing, so we get them moving. We are gonna get a total schedule. I think we're still on track, as what we better be on track, when we put it that way, with what we've told the state we'd have the courthouse out of commission for. Get that demo going, plaster should be on site hopefully by mid-March, and start to see that really come together. They got the ceiling torn out over there, it's pretty cool,
It
so
does look very neat.
I'm excited to see that come together. And then on the admin building, we have had some questions about the elevator. So I will tell you that is not on the original schedule, and it is not our fault necessarily. There was a miscommunication at the elevator equipment supplier. They put the project on hold for a month and a half, which right now we should be wrapping that up. But the result of that was their pushback to, you should see elevator equipment going in 1st of March. And then that should be wrapped up by the end of March with the new elevator equipment in place. So we apologize for the delay. It was one of those, we asked a question right after the holidays, that, hey, you guys showing up here in January? And they're like, oh no. So people have taken their licks over that, but appreciate everybody keeping their patience with us as we get that done. It's going to be great when it gets done. It's just unfortunately that there's a little communication on the vendor side that was not good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, next up on the agenda is a discussion of possible action to approve the minutes of the February 11th meeting. Moved by Scott, seconded by Santos. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes. Next up, correspondence. Santos, do you have anything?
No, I don't have any questions.
I do not.
I don't have anything.
Doug?
I had a road complaint on Kincaid Avenue that I took a look at. And it appears to be a spring in the road that's causing some problems. He's decided to address it when the weather conditions are right and when you can get there without destroying the roads to get something in there.
Makes sense.
So it's at his discretion when I get there.
Any committee meetings last week?
I had no committee.
I had a budget work session with the Mental Health and Disability Services region. It looks like all 5 counties have decided to levy the maximum, which is very nice because we're operating in an area there. It's the first time I think Scott County will have levied its maximum, so yay there, I guess. What concerns me is not necessarily something that is anything we can do, but as is no news to anyone here, the region is in a heap of trouble when it comes to a sustainable financial future because of the caps imposed by the legislature. Right now, we are looking at going negative about 1.5 years to 2 years, depending on how things go. That, of course, is a problem, and we still don't know the extent to which the state is going to saddle us with new requirements, including children's mental health and disability services. So, all kinds of fun stuff there, and unfortunately, the only real way out of it is a legislative solution. And the legislature has been long on problem creation and short on problem solving. So, it's going to be fun.
When was that?
I'm sorry, that was last month, excuse me, Friday.
Last Friday?
The 15th. Santos?
Well, I had a meeting with Lily on Friday for the annual meeting. Had their stakeholders and the board members there. We discussed about the future. They have some issues that they're working with there at the meeting with the facade, trying to do some fundraising. Had some issues with the insurance, thinking that they could recover it. Challenges are now it's not, it's on them. So we're going to try to do some fundraising, working with some potential sponsors to try to come up with creative ideas to try to work through that. They also had an update on just a couple businesses locally there trying to potentially come in to the Westland area, and a lot of good positive things that the 2019 they have forecasted for us to try to do for economic development there in Westland. Overall, it was a good meeting and a lot of good positives.
Okay, next up, receiving information from county employees. Sir?
Just quickly, the meetings are on the 21st, as Lynn mentioned.
Oh, the Thursday, Army Corps.
I may have said the 20th, but they're on the 21st.
Okay. Okay, items with the administration office. Looks like their first up is discussion and possible action to approve resolution 02-18-1901 to fix a date for a public hearing on a general obligation loan agreement. Nancy, anything on that?
This is just the first step in the process to borrow the money that we included in the next year's budget.
I will move to approve.
And moved. Second. By Scott, seconded by Santos. This is a roll call vote. Scott? Aye. Santos?
Aye.
Doug? Aye. And I vote aye. Motion passes. Next up is discussion and possible action to adopt a revised Muscatine County Law Enforcement Certification Cost Policy.
This is a policy that we've had in place for a number of years, and there's recently been some discussion in terms of some of the hires that are going on, and some discussion with Alan to make sure that the language that we have in place falls under the Iowa administrative rules in terms of being able to recoup those dollars. And so the proposed amendments really just more clearly define, number one, more clearly define what falls under that certification costs and what we can ask for reimbursement on, and then makes the policy has a paragraph in there that says if we hire a law enforcement officer away from another agency and that law enforcement officer owes that agency reimbursement because they left within their time frame, that we will pay those costs to that other agency, and then the employee is liable to us if they don't stay for the rest of that period of time. The way the policy has been written in the past, it says that we will do that. We've changed that to now say that we may do that at the sheriff's discretion, because that's not always the best option to handle it that way.
Well, I would move to approve.
Scott has moved. Is there a second? Second by Santos. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion passes. Item 11C is discussion and possible action to accept a 3-year proposal from Reliance Standard Life Insurance for life, accidental death, and dismemberment, and long-term disability coverage for Muscatine County employees.
John Becky has served as our agent of record for a number of years for these particular benefits. This includes the basic life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance. Right now, we provide $10,000 of coverage of each to all of our employees at no cost. We also have a long-term disability policy program that there's a 90-day waiting period, and then it pays 60% of their pre-disability income for a period of time. And then employees, we also offer employees the opportunity to purchase supplemental additional life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance for themselves, their spouses, and their dependents. We had been with Lincoln Financial for a number of years, probably 10, 12 years. So this year, the current policy we have expires April 1st, so this year, John and I talked about it and decided it was time to go out for bids again. After going out for bids, the best proposal that we got back that I'm asking you guys to approve today, for the basic life and the accidental death and dismemberment insurance, that portion that we pay for, the rates are enough lower that if the board so chooses, we could actually increase what we pay for on behalf of employees to $20,000, which in today's world is a certainly much more reasonable and much more common in terms of what other employers do. But we can increase that to $20,000 for each one of those and still be paying about $2,300 a year less than we are now. The long-term disability coverage, there's a reduction in that cost. So we will see some savings there as well. And then the voluntary life and accidental death and dismemberment, they're matching the current rates. And we have a 3-year rate guarantee on all of these. So what I need from the board today is just action for you to accept this proposal and then specify in that acceptance whether you want to stay with the $10,000 basic life and AD&D, or if you want to increase that to 20.
What would the savings be if we stayed with the same amount?
If we stayed with the same amount we have now, our savings would be about $6,000 a year.
Per employee or?
No, that's total. If we bump up to the 20, we still save about $2,300 a year. If we stay with the 10, our savings over what we're doing right now would be about $6,000 a year.
So overall,
Yep.
$3,700.
Yep.
That amount of money, I'd like to see us double the coverage.
I think it's something positive that we can do for our employees.
Yeah.
I move to approve with the amended change for 20,000.
Santos has moved.
I'll second.
Scott has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Wonderful. Okay, and then the last one, I'm going to let Sherry lead this discussion.
Okay.
Good morning.
Hey, Sherry.
Last week, on Wednesday, a major property tax reform proposal was introduced in-house. And it is expected to go into effect. There are a lot of things that could happen, before this happens, but basically, in a nutshell, they want to, excuse me, cap our general fund and our rural fund levies at our 1920 amount budgeted or taxed for. So that's why we're talking about this today, is if this passes, the taxes we levy or expected to levy and published for our next year's budget will be what we're held at.
With the growth factor.
With the growth factor, a valuation growth factor.
So another instance where the state wants to tell us how much we can levy?
Yes.
Not only do they want to tell us how much we can levy, this legislation is introduced at a time when we're already far enough in the budget process that fortunately for us, we do have enough time. If you guys decide to do something different, we do have enough time to republish and get this done under the deadline, just barely. But my guess is there's a lot of counties out there that won't have time to do that. And so they're going to be locked into a number that they didn't know they were going to be locked into when they picked it.
Mm-hmm. Similar thing happened in 95, 96 with the mental health
Yep.
freeze.
And that's worked out great.
Right. Well, at least with that one,
Sarcasm come through?
with that one, they froze the dollars levied.
Yeah.
So no matter what our valuation did, we couldn't levy. At least this one is allowing us to apply our current tax levy rate to the new valuation and capture a little bit of growth. But,
Take care of your own crap.
well, I put together some possible levy adjustments. Basically, we're in pretty good shape if we do nothing in our general basic fund. If you would want to increase the general basic fund to balance the budget, we would have to increase it by, based on the 1920 budget, we'd have to raise that levy rate by 27 cents. Now, that being said, the amount budgeted for inmate reimbursement is a little light. The actual numbers come in more than that. So I think all in all, we probably have a balanced budget. But if something would happen with that federal prisoner revenue, then we've got a whole nother set of problems. So, so on paper, we're spending more than we're bringing in our general fund. In all reality, we'll bring in $500,000 more in federal revenue, most likely, than we had. So there, we're I think in fine shape there. In all the discussion we've had about roads, if we would want to increase the secondary roads transfer to the maximum, that would require 13-cent levy increase for next year's budget. So these are all things that if you decide you might want to do, we need to take a look at. It kind of forces our hand. Do we do them now because we're going to be frozen and not be able to do them, not likely to be able to do them later? Our general supplemental fund, we pretty much got a balanced budget there. We're $3,000 short, so the reality is I wouldn't recommend we make any change there.
Where is this? This has just been introduced.
Wednesday.
Do you think it's gonna pass?
It's just a study bill, so we don't know. It may not, or it may look different. What's passed may look different than what's proposed, but Nancy and I talked about it, thought just in case, you guys need to be aware of the potential to be frozen.
Have we had
You have to have a levy rate frozen.
Has there been any contact with Garrett Carlson on this?
No,
We need to get on
yeah. Because I think it was introduced Wednesday, and we were emailed Friday, weren't we, Nancy? I think that's when we got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think something we need to seriously take a look at is the rural services levy. And my recommendation would be one of the first two options, to increase the tax levy to match our expenditures, which would be 19 cents, or keep it at 25% fund balance, which would also be 20 cents. Down below you see if we went to maximum transfer to secondary roads, what those numbers would look like. We haven't done that in the time I've been here, so I would expect we're not wanting to do that now, but that's what it would look like
When would we need to decide on this?
today. So I can send, because then I need to redo all my publications and send it to the newspaper, and
So what would be a 25% fund balance? What would that be, you say?
for
Rural
For
services.
rural services, what's the
What's the
25% amount? It's, I think, 650,000, I think.
Sherry, on those rural services, with the aggregate cost increase, it was up 17 cents, am I 16 or 17?
For 1920,
Yeah, am I right?
I do have that.
I didn't bring my budget
in
book.
front of me.
I might have my,
I
let me see, I don't know if I do.
I can go grab.
feel
I'm
like it.
thinking 16. I'm
No,
thinking
I
Thanks.
pulled mine out.
Oh, he's got it.
So, because my concern with rural services is, when we're spending more than we bring in, and we can only capture growth, if we have plenty of growth, we can probably survive that way. If we don't, then, we spend that fund balance down to zero and have no mechanism really.
We gotta protect it.
Yeah, our general basic and general supplemental, I think we're fine. Pending some disaster, I think we're fine, but I think my recommendation would be to bump up the rural services levy by 20 cents.
And there is provisions in that House study bill, isn't there, that if you have an emergency situation, you can jump through some extra hoops to potentially levy more money if you have some sort of emergency. Which is why we're less worried about the general fund, but that rural services fund.
And the same thing could happen there, I mean, because our general basic fund now is over, for I don't know how many years, has been over the $3.50 cap, which means when I publish a notice of public hearing, I have to publish a separate notice saying we're levying over the maximum, and this, and it's to fund essential county purposes. We don't have a special project, we just need the extra money to pay for our essential purposes, so.
How much pushback have you gotten in all those years on that from the public?
None,
None, ever.
no. So if we did nothing, we have the potential, from the way this reads right now, is if we had an issue with rural services, we have, because they talk about a public hearing, so at our budget hearing, we publish notice that we're gonna levy over the maximum rural services levy by whatever amount. And typically, we've had no one show up at a budget hearing. And I don't know, this will be my 28th budget, I think, that I've done in.
Couple years, we had some people, but.
One year we had one person who had just graduated from college and working in HR and had an issue with our health insurance.
Sharon, what do you recommend?
I think we're probably not damaged terribly if we do nothing. If we do anything, I would increase that rural services levy to bring that fund balance to 25%, which is the recommended, you know, to pay our bills from July through September when taxes come in.
And so what would that rate number be then, Sharon?
$2.99 if you round it.
Ow.
Yeah. And the maximum levy allowed in rural services is $3.95. So
So we're looking at 20 cents on top of the 16 cents.
Yep.
That's what I wasn't sure about.
Yes, that's exactly what you're looking at.
Wow.
And with what we fund out of rural services, there's not a lot of potential for reduction. I mean, what you would have to do is reduce your transfer to secondary roads, and what we've been trying to do is build that number up so we can stay on top of our road maintenance, but otherwise, you know, we pay for zoning, there's not a lot of fluff in that budget. The libraries, even if you cut that back some, you're not gonna affect the budget that much. So, you know, the bulk of it is for secondary roads. So the question is, you know, what's our plan for funding secondary roads? Continue funding for
But
secondary roads.
if nothing happens in this legislation,
Then we could bump it back down, but
I know.
But we'd have a year of the higher taxes.
Oh, man, I'm having a real problem with this.
Well, I have a problem with the timing of it,
You know, that's incredibly poor.
because, because there's not a lot of time for any real thought or discussion about how do we want to move ahead.
Right.
But like I said, if you choose to leave everything as it is, and in 2 years, if this all passes as proposed, we have an issue where we're out of fund balance. We have the extra notice of public hearing. It looks to me like that's what it's gonna look like, that we're gonna levy over the maximum. And my guess is, because it talks about,
So we're establishing a new cap with
How
this
many-
levy, right?
yes, we are, we'll be capped at our 1920 levy rate.
And I hate raising this as much as Scott does, but if this is the cap for the foreseeable future and all the little nibbles the state takes, you know, when no one's looking.
Well, that was kind of the discussion back in '86 with the mental health levy, and no one thought that that was gonna be capped for, you know.
You said that if it turns out that, we increase it, and then we let the legislation go through, and let's say hypothetically they don't pass it, we can come back in and lower it the year.
The following year,
The following year,
yeah.
I'd
once
rather
we
have
sort
rates
of,
too high for 1 year than rates not high enough for several.
well, and I don't think that rate's really too high, because we wanna maintain a 25%
Yeah.
fund balance, and that's all we're doing. We're not building that fund by any means doing this. We're holding
Just
25%, which is what we do in the other funds.
Yeah, this would be penny wise pound foolish not to do it, I think.
So what do you need from us?
Direction to, I guess,
If you want to change any of those levy rates.
yeah. And
If,
then we'll have
in
to,
the proposed budget. At this point, what you're given, you're not deciding, you're just giving us direction about whether we need to publish a revised budget with a different number. And then we'll have to, we have to move our public hearing?
we'll have
yes.
to push our public hearing out, so you have some time between when I had put this ready and sent it out for publication until our hearing. You can always lower it, at that point you can't raise it.
Right.
So if you publish the raised amount, you could decide at that hearing,
So
you
if
know,
we
this
decide-
isn't going anywhere, or whatever.
So we need them to set
So
a
if
pub,
we decide to raise it today and
hearing
then
date
go
too.
dies an ignominious bad death.
And we
in the
talked this
next
through, I missed
week,
that one.
We could always go back to where we were.
Gives
Yeah.
us time to discuss too.
Yeah, what do you guys think?
I would rather do that.
Yeah. What do you think, Scott? I know you're getting heartburn.
I just can't hardly stand this, to be painted in this corner the way this situation
Yeah.
has occurred, I'll tell you.
Well, and there's an
I-
awful lot of work that goes into putting a budget together
Mhm.
Right.
and entering it into 4 different systems and get it all balanced, and now have to go in and change that. I don't know why this couldn't have happened sooner, but it didn't, so, if the direction is, I
I need a
change the notice of
calendar.
public hearing with the higher amount, the rural services levy at $299 instead of $279. We'll have to set another,
How soon that's just what I was thinking about, how soon do you have to publish? What did we talk about? Because I didn't put it on the agenda to change the public hearing date.
well, I can,
No, you
if we
can't.
pick the date, then I can get the publication ready with that date, and they could set the date Monday.
Okay, all right,
You know, as long as the date they set is the date I put on the notice.
yeah, okay, all right, we're
Yeah.
good then, all right.
Yeah,
I thought, shoot, we missed that.
yeah.
So,
'Cause
I would vote in favor of this, only because, I don't want to, be short in our situation, but also because, if this all falls apart, we're able to lower this number, and, but I will watch this incredibly closely.
And that will, I assume we're looking at March 11th
Yes.
for the public
That's what we
hearing.
talked
So that
about.
gives you some time to look at it, and at that point, you could say, no, we want to go back to the 279. Because like I said, at your budget hearing, you can reduce, you can't increase at that point, so.
You look at the 3 situations that have happened now, that have driven this, that's with the mental health, the aggregate, now this situation, the legislation, you know, and,
It's affected our levy by $1.
oh, it's horrible.
All stuff outside of our control.
But I don't wanna be penny wise and pound foolish either.
We gotta provide services.
That's
We
correct.
gotta protect the
So
residents,
we have to look at it from that perspective.
no matter how much Des Moines wants to make it a tough job.
Well, I'm assuming in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a better idea of whether this is gonna go anywhere, or, you know, and the problem we have is, sometimes things are approved looking different than how they were
Right.
proposed.
It might not come out anything like that, Sherry.
Right.
Right.
Well,
But we're not doing our job if we don't give you guys a heads up about this and help you guys decide how we need to
do
proceed
I then hear a
in
motion
case.
to,
Not a mo-
We don't need a motion, we just,
Direction.
at this point, we just need direction to change that levy number in the proposed budget. And then Monday, we will have an agenda item for you to take action to, postpone the budget public hearing, which was supposed to be next Monday.
right.
We'll postpone it to March 11th.
And if I could suggest, I'm proposing to write a letter addressed to this Mr. Lehine and his committee, that if you all gentlemen are interested in joining me on it, that we would sign on Monday, expressing our displeasure at his proposal, manner and means of it as well. So, I'll put one together if you guys want to sign it, great, if not, great too.
I'll do it.
Alright, well, thank you guys.
Awesome.
Maybe someday we could just do county business. But you know, why start? Other.
The only other thing I would tell you is that, one of the things that is supposed to happen is before the board closes the public hearing and votes on the budget, the compensation board is supposed to give you salary recommendations. Typically, the comp board meets in early February. With everything going on with my mother and such, the comp board hasn't met. I did reach out to him Saturday thinking that we needed to get it done this week. However, now it sounds like we're moving the public hearing date, so I will reach back out to the comp board and let them know we're not quite in the urgent situation that we were, but my intent would be to have the compensation board meet sometime in the next couple of weeks here, and you'll get notice of that, because you're invited to attend and provide input if you want to. But hopefully that'll be happening sometime in the next couple of weeks here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, that discussion reminded me of something I need to cover for you legislatively. And I want to give you, I'll try and be brief, background. Last year, the legislature passed a bill allowing grain haulers and construction to haul 96,000 pounds year-round instead of the 80,000 that it's been for decades. In our county, we were one of the least harmed counties. Now, the county engineers have been trying to get legislation to reverse this not very well thought out action. But we had to re-rate 27 bridges, and 3 bridges had to be posted, because they just won't carry that load. And some counties, that was in the dozens or maybe even more than 100 bridges. So when they take these actions with no thought, it's, there's costs involved, there's dangers involved. But I want to make you aware of Senate File 184, formerly Senate Study Bill 1045. And I'm going to read you for, actually from the Tama County engineer who goes down to the State House along with ISAC. This bill allows a permit to be issued for hauling raw forestry products up to 130,000 pounds. Okay, that's 50,000 more than the 80,000 that they can do now. There's a provision in the bill that would allow the DOT to issue an annual permit, but the permit being valid on 9 non-primary roads, that's our roads, as well as primary. In other words, after the DOT issues its first permit, every bridge in the state will have a 130,000 pound load limit. Without exaggeration, I can say passage of this bill in its current form will result in a bridge failure. So it is beyond me why it still has legs and is moving forward. And he simply says we need to be more aggressive politically. please get your board excited about this and have them bring pressure on our elected officials in Des Moines. Important considerations are the DOT permit would allow 130,000 pound loads on county roads. The DOT is not as knowledgeable in county roads as the local engineers. 130,000 pound load creates considerably more stress than an 80,000 pound load. You don't have to be an engineer to do that math. And a bridge built in 1940 may be capable of carrying an 80,000 pound load, just as capable as one built in 2018. So neither one will be posted with a weight limit, but that doesn't mean the bridge built in 1940 is capable of carrying 130,000 pounds. We still have many older bridges in rural Iowa that are serving our farming community, but they will be compromised by this load. So I've typically said in the past, two of you knew that the legislators still listen to you as the electeds better than they listen to us. So if any of you ever mind to speak to your state senator, please ask them to not. And it made it out of subcommittee, it made it out of the full transportation committee, and the bill's out there to be voted on. And just to be blunt, this is a follow-on of the stupidity of last year, only incredibly worse. It will be incredibly costly and probably dangerous.
Could you put all that in an email to us?
I can't. I will. I just wanted it to get out there to the rest of the world too. I will clip that and send that to you in an email.
The wear and tear on the roads is
Oh.
incredible, not just the bridges, everything.
Yeah, I just, I think some people are just not thinking down there. I don't know how to say it other than that. So,
They didn't consider that. They have all the check scales and all these control mechanisms that they try to do to make sure.
if you have the opportunity, and I said I will send that, if you have an opportunity to converse with our state senator.
Sounds like you have a couple things to talk to him about.
Yeah, you have a couple, so, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you much. Anybody else? All right, after all that fun, we are adjourned.
Thank you.